Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Empowering Women podcast. And we are going to just switch this baby up today. So today, when this releases, it will be Manufacturing Day, which is a special day for all of us who have spent most of our lives in the manufacturing field, including yours truly. But what is super exciting today is I have Meaghan Ziemba on the call today, or as our guest. And she's actually not our guest. She's going to be our host today. So we are going to flip the script today. Meaghan, if you've not met her, you need to meet her. You need to follow her on LinkedIn, and we'll put that link in the show notes. But she owns her own company, Z Inc. Solutions, if I'm correct. She's an owner, copywriter of that company. But I have to say, what I love about her more is she has the Mavens of Manufacturing, which is typically a live broadcast that she does. Sometimes it's recorded, but she always highlights women that are just rocking it in the world of manufacturing. She is everywhere. She's fresh off the IMTS show as we're recording this. So excited to have a conversation with Meaghan, and I'm going to be on the receiving end today. So thank you, Meaghan, for being here with us.
Yeah, thank you, Shannon, for inviting me. I'm super excited about this because I have a huge passion of putting the spotlight on other women and so that they can share their stories. So this is going to be a fun twist. I've only done this one other time. It was with Chris Lukey when he was celebrating his 200th episode. He invited me to put him in the hot seat, and it was really fun. It was a great conversation, and I think listeners need to hear your story too, so that they can understand your passion and why you do what you do. So this will be fun.
Well, thank you for agreeing to it. We're
Yeah.
turning the world upside down here and empowering women, which you know we love to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So you sent me some of your top topics that you're really passionate about. So I just really want to jump in and dive in. Like I feel like if you're a woman in this space, we all know the challenges and the barriers that we face every day. I don't think they're as strong as they used to be in the past. Like I think women who came before us have done a really good job to help open more doors of opportunities for us. But I want to ask you first off, what do you think are some of the steps that are most critical in advancing gender parity in STEM fields today? Because I feel like there are some things that are happening, especially here in the United States, that are helping women feel more confident to pursue careers in male-dominated industries. But I wanted to get your opinion on what steps you think are critical for that.
Yeah, so I think most of the listeners know this, but I am a STEM girl. I'm a STEMinist, just like Meaghan is. I think what's really scary to me, I just looked this stat up in preparation for our conversation today, is that women make up only 34% of STEM or science, technology, engineering, and math roles in industry, which really scares me. So I think to your point, we have done a lot, but obviously there is much more to do. And when I was thinking about this conversation today, I thought, what is I've seen hold myself back, and what have I seen hold others back? And the first one that I think's really held me back is this nasty little word of perfectionism. So I think, especially with young girls, we need to encourage innovation and not perfection. So if I look at my own story, I feel like my value is very much tied to being the type A, to being the top in the class, to being the best at this, to getting the best grade on this test, to being the leader. And not that those are necessarily bad things. I just don't think it created the space for innovation and failure. You need to fail. I don't really like that word, but you need to fail in order to grow and learn. And what I see in young girls is this, oh, I've got to get this A on this test versus, oh crap, what if I really learn this concept? I've got to stumble a little bit before I succeed. Another thing that made me really think about it was building support in communities at all stages, young girls. But for me, when you're the only in a room or in a collection of rooms, you got to have that space like, Meaghan, you're creating for us here, that we can talk about things, maybe things that are uncomfortable, or ask what we think are stupid questions. For me, that's another one. And then I think probably the hardest one is in addressing the systemic inequities in the workplace. So a big one for me, and I'm actually not a parent, but I think this is a huge one. I think you're the parent of two boys. So the parental leave for both parents, because if we don't have parental leave for men, for example, how can women really step into STEM roles in the workplace? It's really hard to do that. I think that also applies to elder care. If you have an aging parent, so really have that systemic barrier start to be removed. Oh no, thoughts from you, Meaghan. What would you say there?
Yeah, so one of the things I've got so many things going on in my mind now after your response, but you mentioned right away, like you don't really like the word failure. And I think that's part of the problem too. We're programmed to kind of squirm at that word failure.
Yep.
Like it makes us feel some type of way, where I feel like our male counterparts, it doesn't bother them as much. Maybe it does. I'm not inside their head, but I've had to teach myself how to be comfortable with admitting when I fail at something and change my mindset, to not have it be so negative, but oh no, this is an opportunity for learning. Like, what's
Mm,
the lesson here that I've learned from? So I'm getting better at accepting the word failure, not getting as
mm.
uncomfortable when I hear it, because I view it as an opportunity now instead of like apocalyptic. Oh, I can't talk today. Apocalyptic situation. Because that, I feel like that was my old self, where I'm like, oh my God, it's the end of the world because I made a mistake.
Yep.
The other thing is with getting comfortable with talking about things that are uncomfortable. I feel
Mm,
like how society is going now, everybody's afraid to offend somebody. Like
mm,
if they say certain things, they're afraid that they're going to offend someone. And I think it's a two-way street. Like we need to start stepping outside of our own personal experiences and stop assuming that someone's coming into a conversation with malicious intent. Like
mm,
not everybody is coming into a conversation to make you feel bad about yourself or to
mm.
offend you. They might just have a different personal experience where unconsciously they don't know their own biases, if that makes sense. So I feel like we
Yep.
need to start having conversations that are crucial and trying to put ourselves in that person's shoes to better understand where they're coming from.
Mm,
With elder care, I never even thought about that. Like the whole paternity leave, I think is vital because it's not just moms. There's dads out there too, and they need to spend time with their children. And how we are now with work situations, there's a lot of parents who are both working and they need that partnership, they need that team. So I think we're going to see a lot happening in future manufacturing where companies are going to be more flexible. I actually just had a conversation with a VP, and she said that she wants parents to know that there's that flexibility. So if something does come up in their child's life, they're not going to get pinned or penalized for having to leave work because of something happening with their children. But elder care, I never even thought about that. I think that's like really
yep.
important because there are a lot of families who are taking care of it. And my parents are getting older too, but
Yep.
I have this thought process where they're immortal and they're never gonna die or get
Yep.
sick. So I gotta stop thinking that
Yeah, yeah.
that
I
way.
mean, honestly, Meaghan, I didn't think about it either, but I think most listeners know this. My dad unexpectedly passed away from a heart attack in December of 2020. And unbeknownst to me, they'd had conversations that when one of them was no longer here, that they didn't want to live in their home. And then my dad passed, and my mom said a couple days later, "Can I move in with you?" And so it's
Oh,
turned out to be the best thing for both of us. But at the time, it was like, oh crap. Now what happens, right? And so to your
yeah.
point, like it made me think about there's so many women that are in what they call sandwich situations, right? They have children that still need active care, and then they have elder care that they're also trying to manage. And that's a lot. And so how do you do that and then continue to have a fulfilling career that you want?
Well, and I think that that's a good segue into the next question that I had for you. I feel like a lot of manufacturers don't want to be the only one trying to change things, or they're so used to doing things the way that they've always been done. They don't really know how to start changing some of the things in their work environment. So how can we as a society really challenge these preconceived notions of what's considered normal or acceptable for women in STEM roles? Because I feel like that's one of the main issues, is that because things have been done for so long a certain way, this isn't really top of mind because again, it's that assumption that, oh, well, if they don't know, it's because they're intending to be malicious. And I don't think that's the case. I just think that
Mhm.
people get used to a routine. So some of these things are just they don't are
Yeah.
they're not top of mind for some people. So how can we start challenging that and changing it?
Yeah, I tell you, Megan, this is a tough question, if I'm really honest. I think the one thing, and it's going to sound really silly, but it's what you and I are doing today, and that's just showing up. And I think it's showing
Yeah.
up and being authentic and intentionally occupying spaces the way we are today. Like we just talked about our parents, right? And the way we've seen our parents and the struggle that I've had, and then what I hope doesn't come for you, but could, right? And then you've built such an amazing platform. So I think it's using that platform so they can see what women in STEM look like. And I think our trajectories are very different. So I think it's good to see the differences, right? We're both in STEM related fields, but just seeing the different trajectories. I don't know. How does that feel for you?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, we come in all different shapes and sizes, and I feel like some people, well, and I know some of my friends get critiqued a lot on the way that they look when they're posting something on
Mm,
LinkedIn, and they're critiqued for doing too many selfies or whatever. But it's like if that's how they like getting their message across, and it's a good message, and it resonates with certain members of their audience, I don't understand why they're getting so harshly critiqued. But then you have other women who are in the hands-on areas who are actually working with machines and welders and other things. And I kind of can understand their perspective too, because they're
yep.
not dolled up all the time and there are safety concerns and issues. So
Yep.
I don't know. I think we need to find that healthy balance. But I also, like me coming from a writer's background and a journalistic background, I'm always trying to find out the why of things. Like, why?
Mm,
So I will always ask someone, well, why does that bother you? Or why are you getting upset about that?
mm,
Or why do you think we should handle it this way versus another way? And I feel like when you put yourself in that position of the person that doesn't know and you want
mm,
to learn, I feel like other people are comfortable enough to have those authentic conversations with you. So
yep.
um, I think if you just come from a place of wanting to better yourself and understand another point of view, and it's hard right now in our society because we have such divided points of view in the
Mm,
news media where if you don't think this way then you're this, or if you don't think that way then you're this, and I don't think that helps. So we need to bring back old school journalism where it's
yeah.
always from a place of curiosity and
Yep.
understanding and learning, and not so much from a place of personal opinion. But
Yeah,
that's
I
just me.
love that. I think curiosity, you use that word. I think that is so important. And this is going to sound really silly to our listeners probably, but there's a three-word statement I found is very powerful, and someone taught this to me, and that is tell me more. Especially if somebody says something and your first reaction is like, whoa, I don't know that I agree with that, or that's so foreign to what I understand or my background. To me, that opens up space. And it also says, like your point, I'm open to learning, I'm open to listening. At the end of the day, I may not agree with you, but at least I feel like I've learned and accepted, so to say, your point of view. It may not change mine, but at least I have accepted it and heard more and learned more on the journey.
Mhm. So, I mean, you come from a STEM background. Have you had any personal experiences, or do you have any examples of where gender barriers were broken in the workplace or like educational spaces? And what sort of impact did you see that?
I have a funny story I love to tell. So, um, I do not come from a family of engineers. My dad was in furniture manufacturing. He did grow up in manufacturing, so I had appreciation for that growing up. But my dad had a bachelor's degree in business. My mom has a high school education, so she did not go to college, and she worked in the hosiery industry. So when I did really well in school, so I'm, a junior in high school, and we're obviously starting to talk about college. And I tell my parents I want to be an engineer. And you should have seen, Megan, the look on their faces. They're like, what? You want to do what? And my mom literally said, you want to drive a train? So I, I, I think for my parents, it was like, we don't even know what to do with this, right? We're not sure what to
Yeah.
do with this. Kudos to them. They fully supported this path. They didn't understand it, but I think this is so important for me. They were with me every step of the way. And I'm not a genius by any stretch of the imagination, but I think that parental guardian support is so important. I love the work that Abby does at Smart Girls HQ. So we interviewed her several years ago on the podcast, but she focuses much of her effort around parents as guardians as she does with the young girls, because she's trying to teach the guardians and the parents what is possible. And just like my parents look at me like, where did you come up with that? Right. That
Yeah.
support. So for me, that was like breaking my own parents' barrier of what was possible for a female. The other story that I tell sometimes, in my very first engineering role, I worked in a paper mill, and it was a very, very male populated environment. It was a very rough environment. And I had a really good rapport with many of the operators. So it wasn't an issue of they didn't really like me, or they couldn't converse with me, they couldn't relate to me. But I had one man actually look at me and say, we don't really understand why you're here. And the implication was, oh, well, you're taking the job of somebody that's male. Like, there should be a male person in this role. So for me, it was that balance of breaking that barrier and still maintaining my authenticity and my personality of being a little bit more feminine, and breaking that barrier for them. I could tell it just blew their mind. Like, why in the world would she want to do this profession? So those were two that came to mind for me.
I think you bring up a good point with the parents not being, I don't want to say educated because it makes it sound like they're dumb and they're not dumb, but like unaware of the opportunity. So
Yeah.
um my dad grew up in manufacturing. He was involved in manufacturing ever since I can remember, but it was never discussed as an opportunity for any of us. I'm the youngest
Mm,
of six. Um, and in high school, when we were set to like plan the rest of our lives, because my math and science skills weren't as good as my English skills, it was never brought to my attention
mm,
that that could be a potential option for me. I was always directed towards teaching or
mm.
marketing or something. And I was just like, no, that sounds good to me. Like, I don't want to do it. So I think as a sector, we need to do a better job bringing awareness to the general public about
Yep.
the vast opportunities in manufacturing, but also like explain the importance. But I also think there's still a gap in our educational systems where we're not really doing a good job exposing younger girls to STEM opportunities. Like, some are doing a really good job, but there's still communities where there's still that division about what is gender specific to men and what's gender specific
Mm.
to women in terms of career opportunities. So, you know, what role do you think early education plays? Because I know that there's some conversations around starting programs and changing curriculum at the elementary school level.
Yep.
What role do you think early education has in terms of exposing STEM opportunities to younger generations?
I don't know what your experience is. I'm curious to hear it, but I think it's actually the game changer. So I honestly think when girls get to middle school and high school, it's almost too late. So there
Yeah.
was a study called the STEM Gap, done by an organization called AAUW. And they talk about in that study called the myth of the math brain. So girls decide they have less confidence in math by third grade. I mean, let that sink in, right? So they're what, 8, 9 years old, and they've already decided that they're not good at math. There's no biological evidence to support that. But boys, on the other hand, will say that they're confident in math by second grade before there's really any performance differences that are evident. So, I mean, let that sink in for a minute, because what our listeners may find funny is I decided to do chemical engineering because I loved chemistry, but I also was really good at math, right? So think if that math half of the equation would have been cut off, and
Yeah.
I wouldn't have chosen to go in a manufacturing type field in the world of engineering. The other thing really quickly that it really made me think about what you said about storytelling is I think societally we cultivate interest around communication and stories with women or young girls, right?
Yeah.
And so like they don't think about the harder STEM concepts. And there's a toy company called Goldie Blocks, which I'm sure Megan you've probably heard of. But what I love is they try to marry the concept of books and stories with a construction set. So they're kind
Yeah.
of they're leaning in, so to say, with the more communication storytelling, like your background, but then they're also
Mhm.
kind of throwing in that STEM element to give exposure to girls who I according to their website, about 6 years of age is when girls lose interest in science. So to your point about early education, it's got to start in like K through 3. If you kind of don't get girls in K through 3, it's going to be harder going
Yeah.
forward.
Do you know why she did that? Where that inspiration came up for Goldilocks? So I saw a TED Talk. I can't remember
Yeah,
her
TED
name.
Talk. Yeah, she's done the TED Talk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she talked about how the types of play that boys and girls are encouraged to do. So
Mm,
boys are more encouraged to build things with blocks than girls are. So like
mm,
Lego did a huge push for the pink and purple blocks to try to get more younger girls involved in Lego types play. Like they made a whole series out of it. But they did some sort of study, I think, if I remember a TED Talk correctly, they did some sort of study where they observed the types of plays that boys and girls did, and girls tend
yep.
to sit down and read books more
Yep.
than guys did. And through her own experience, where she had some challenges with her own experience as an engineer, is all of the spatial recognition. And the reason being is because she didn't play with blocks or
Oh, that's a good
Legos
point.
as she was growing up. So that's why she combined the reading with the black so that girls could
Mm,
start gaining that spatial recognition skill that's really important in design and engineering.
yep.
And if you think of like what's that game? Minecraft?
Oh,
That
yeah.
is another. So my daughter played that religiously when she was younger, and she has better math skills than I do, and she also has better spatial
That's
recognition
funny.
than I do. And I just was like, oh my gosh, it's because you played this game religiously and you know how to like turn things and twist. And they kind of, there's studies out about video games too, where I know some people are like, oh, video games are horrible. Yeah, they can be horrible, but if you have the ones like Minecraft where they're actually building things, and I know they're doing stuff with Minecraft too as a way to introduce engineering and design to younger generations. It's the same thing with like iPads and stuff where like kids are using those in schools at younger generations. And
Mm,
now if you take a look at automation and how they're programming robots, it's pretty similar to some of the tools that they're using. So
it's
I just
interesting.
find it interesting that they're making these connections. And I feel like if we can help schools and that's the other issue, right? Like schools need support from our
They do.
community
Yeah.
to fund some of these things. So if manufacturers can connect to educational institutions like that and either donate or come in and speak to the kids, there's a lot better chance of them getting excited about those
Mm,
opportunities and pursuing it as they go through school.
yeah, that's a
So
good point. Yeah. There's
yeah.
one, you've probably heard of it called Project Scientist. So they try to do that
Oh,
as well. Not necessarily manufacturing specific, more just STEM in general, but yeah.
see, and I love all that. What was that box thing, the subscription box? It was like
Is
Kiwi something
oh
Kiwi.
yeah, I don't remember. What you're saying rings a bell, but I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah, but most of their stuff that they had different tiers. So like depending on the age group of your
Yeah.
child, they had STEM related play items that they would mail to you on a monthly basis so you could
Yeah.
start
Oh,
having
that's
fun with
fun.
your kid.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Smart Girls HQ does it too. I don't think there's like a subscription, but they have different sets that you can do based on skill level. But to your point, I don't think it's a subscription though.
Yeah. Well, another thing too that, I want to talk about is leadership, because I feel like we're still struggling in that area. Like you mentioned that stat, 34%. And one of the interesting stats that I found globally, engineering wise, you only are represented at 13% on a global scale for
Oh,
women
that's really
engineers.
scary.
But then when you look at leadership, it's 1 in 4 women hold leadership positions. And I think that's more specific to the United States and not on a global level. Um, but we have this thing called human centric leadership, and I wanted to get your insights on that. Like, how do you define human centric
Mm.
leadership and what differentiates it from traditional leadership models? Because I feel like that's a shift that's happening, especially in manufacturing. And I think that it's a vital component to really help women project further in their careers.
Yeah, so I'm gonna selfishly plug myself for a minute. I got learned advocacy. I'm actually doing a
It's
uh
your show. You don't have to explain. That's fine.
so I'm actually doing a speech on this and empowering women in one of the breakout sessions. So if you're interested to hear more, I will definitely be sharing more during that. But for me, it's switching from what I call power over to power to. Um, I think it really, when you look at our old traditional models, it's based on this control hierarchical structure. It's really based on delivering results to shareholders. That's the old model. And if you think about it, it's really just the same old tired playbook. And it comes out of the Industrial Revolution, right? So it's long, long, long overdue to be changed. And I think it really shifts focus from that controlling competitive behavior that, at least for me as a woman, I can only speak for myself. I am very competitive, but I'm really not comfortable in that kind of controlling competitive behavior, to one that I think is focused on a pretty powerful central premise, which is the courage to see and be seen. So think about how powerful that is when you've been in a room with colleagues or fellow leaders and you feel really truly seen for who you are. You don't feel like
Mhm.
that I'm showing up, and I tell you, I did this early on in my career, show up as somebody else. Like I'm work Shannon today, right? Versus all of me. And I think it takes a lot of courage to see and be seen. But I really think that is the game changer for human centric leadership. And it's really rooted in words that we're not used to using at work. We're using the word courage, but more from a strength mentality. And courage is actually based on a heart word, and really having empathy and curiosity combined with that courage.
So how do you think that's going to like really build more engaging and thriving work cultures? Because I feel like if you can do that, then your employers are going to be happier and then they're going to be more productive. So what are your thoughts on that?
For me, I can tell you in the last 3 years, I've watched this happen. It's really been a game changer for me. So I'll step back a little bit farther than that. So for me, this is where COVID changed the whole world. So at the
Oh,
same time COVID happened, my day job company went through a huge reorganization and split. And oh, by the way, I took a new role managing a team of people that I had, for the most part, never met before. And so all these things happened. I'm no longer in the office with the people that were located with me. I don't know them. For those of us who have office jobs like mine, I'm operating out of my home, right? I'm watching kids go through the frame. I'm watching dogs and cats like climb up on people's desks. And I had this epiphany moment. I was like, shoot, this is the thing that's been missing the whole time, right? We thought we had to see Megan or Shannon as this work professional, and we never saw the dogs and the kids and maybe the messy desk or the messy shelf behind us, right? The whole human element of that. And so I started a different role a couple years later, and it was a complete career pivot. And I thought, how in the world am I going to lead a team where, quite frankly, I have no idea what they do every day? I'm still learning the language, I'm still learning the skill set. And I realized that I just have to be myself. I have to show up every day fully as myself. And I have to pull them in to do the same thing. And what that's resulted in is double-digit employee engagement score changes. So that's the
wow.
hard data. But what I think the soft data is I work every day to create an environment where people can be creative and where I hope that they feel valued for their uniqueness and what they bring to the table. So for me, I don't know. That's my experience, Megan. I know you're an entrepreneur, so yours might be a little bit different.
Well, I think the reason why I became an entrepreneur is because most of my work experience, I couldn't show up as myself. I'm a very opinionated. It's funny because I'm introvert, but I'm also very opinionated on things that I'm passionate about. And sometimes that was like, I was penalized for that because if things were done a certain way for so long, they didn't want to hear what I had to say. They wouldn't want to hear my creative solutions for some of the issues. I feel like the job that I had right before I started Mavens and then got hired on. I feel like that job, the manager I had was the most understanding manager that I've ever had out of my whole career. And I don't know if it had anything to do that she was a woman or not. But when I told her, I feel really bad about this, but Mavens is taking off, and I just feel it in my gut that I have to pursue this. She was very understanding and very encouraging. And she said, if you need anything while you're going through this, reach out to me and let me know. And she was really the only manager that I had throughout my career that really challenged me. Instead of telling me what to do, she always would be like, why are you doing it this way? Is there any other way that you could possibly do this? Is there any other way that you could present this information? So she always like challenged me by leaving that conversation open. But yeah, I think when you work for a company that allows you to be vulnerable and allows you to fail, and they embrace that failure as a learning experience, employees are happier and they're more loyal to those employers, and they put their best foot forward all the time, and they end up being more productive and more innovative. So I guess, you know, do you have any advice for current leaders in the manufacturing and engineering space on how they can shift that focus towards more empathy and connection without losing sight of their key business objectives? Because I feel like some are so used to that control and command type leadership that they feel like if they start letting some autonomy in with their employees, then their business is going to start going down the tube or fail. Like, do you have advice for leaders like that?
Yeah, I guess it is a hard paradigm to shift, but I think what I want people to think about is how fast our business world is changing, right? So the other day, I was just curious. Social media has taken over our world, right? We all know that. So I was curious, like, how long has this whole thing been around? So I think Facebook was one of the first. And I thought, when was Facebook founded? Facebook was founded in 2004. So that's only 20 years ago. So think about that. Our entire world has been turned upside down in 20 years. So I would ask leaders to challenge your paradigm, right? So if you do things, if you're a little on the older side like me, if you do things like you did them 10 or 15 years ago as a leader, is that really going to work today? And if you're really focused on yourself, like what I think about things, you're missing a whole set of ideas. And I think one of the things that I've seen really change, what I love about our younger generations, is they're so focused on purpose. I'm a Gen Xer, so I went through the whole latchkey kid. That's when layoffs started. That's when, company loyalty really changed. But this younger generation, they're more focused on impact and purpose. And if you have a control and you can't provide people that purpose, you're not going to get the best and the brightest, at least to stay with you. They may join you for a little bit, but they're not going to stay with you. And then I think the other thing is, think about what the next 20 years are going to bring. If you don't have the creative juices flowing from not only your team, but adjacent teams, and you're willing to come together and converse, you're going to get left behind.
Yeah.
Big time, right?
I think it's funny that you said Facebook was created in 2004.
Yeah.
And then it was like, how old am I now? Like, geez.
Yeah.
It started out as a college platform too.
Right.
It wasn't
I think so.
But I remember working for a publication, and one of the big debates that we had was whether or not we were going to create a Facebook page for the business. And I know since then, there's still companies out there in the manufacturing world that struggle to be on social media
Yep.
because, and the other issue that's coming up is personal branding. So
Mm,
how do we use personal branding with our employees on platforms like LinkedIn to really get people to trust our brand and to contact us if they have a problem that we could potentially solve? So there's still that debate on like what's appropriate, not appropriate
yep.
for work environments. And so I'll be interested to see like where that goes, especially here in the United States, because we seem to have a lot of social issues um that are dividing us more than bringing us together.
Mm,
So it's going to be, but that whole conversation around impact and purpose, I think, is something to really talk about, because one of the things that we focus here on in the United States is DEI, so diversity and equity. And I want to ask you, because this was something that you said that you were passionate about. What do you think are the most significant barriers that prevent gender and racial equity from being realized, and how can we address those? Because with some of the conversations I've had with manufacturers, some of one of the main things they say, well, we don't care what you look like or how you dress or how you identify as, we just want the work done. And my whole
mm.
rebuttal to that is, well, that's great, but there is a reason why our industry has looked the way that it has looked for so long,
Yep.
because there are people that don't think this is a place for them. So how can we really overcome some of those barriers so that everyone can feel welcome in this sector?
Yeah, I think we talked about we talked about systemic barriers earlier. So I think that plays a huge piece into it. I
Mhm.
think putting more emphasis on human-centric leadership and teaching leaders about equity versus equality. And for those of you who may not know the difference, equity is more around, what does Meaghan need differently, right? What does she need to succeed? And what she needs to succeed is going to look very different from maybe what I need to succeed, just based on our own trajectories, our own experiences. It could be based on gender and socioeconomic background. It could be based on a different ability level that each of us have, but learning to tailor that. Because I mean, if you and I started the same job, we have very different skill sets, right? So
Mhm.
what I need to succeed and what you needed to succeed. And if a manager laid out and said, hey, here's your development plan, and mine and your development plan looks the same, we're going to be in trouble, right? One of us is probably going to fail pretty miserably, and we're going to go look for something different. I also think one of my passions is around gender and racial wealth equity, because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, we all want to do better. We want better for our children and the next generation. I see three really areas in there where women struggle with the wealth gap. And I think the wealth gap is important because wealth is essentially like what's your net worth, essentially, with your investments, with your real estate, what all that means. Women on average live longer than men. So it's actually even an exacerbated problem. And I think when you look at that gap, and that women's health coming out of that gap, and the racial is actually worse than the gender gap. There's a lot of different things, but the pay gap is one we're all familiar with, right? So we talk about it in an aggregate. So, depending on the data you look at, women make 82 to 84% of what a white Caucasian male would earn, but it's a lot worse for women of color. So the stat that I saw recently was from a November 2021 article, and that Black women make 64 cents on the dollar. And for Hispanic women, it's even worse at 57% on the dollar. So as a Caucasian woman, I'm actually doing better. And actually for Caucasian females, this is closing. But for women of color, it's not closing at near the rate, which is what it's dragging down the whole measurement. But then the other
Well, yeah, and
piece,
if
oh,
you're
go
if
ahead,
you're
please.
getting that if you're getting that information from a November 2021 study,
Right. It's probably worse.
you're not reporting anything new on it.
Correct. Yeah, fair.
That's the most recent study. But I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
No,
Go ahead.
please. This is a conversation.
Yeah.
The other part that really bothers me is the investment gap. So let's just pretend we're all getting the same pay for a second. Women aren't typically investing like men are, so they keep more of their money in the bank. I think part of this has to do, it's been a very masculine industry. So it's intimidating to me. I'll be really honest. I'm not very good. I do invest a lot, but I don't optimize it the way that I should. And then I think the third one relates to what we said about systemic barriers earlier about parental and elder care leave. They have these responsibilities outside the workplace and they don't spend as much time in the workplace. So obviously your ability to invest and earn is going to be tied to that. So if you need to take time away or you need to take some leave, that's going to impact your ability to continue to move forward.
And just to kind of highlight that on a personal note, like I've been recently divorced and
Oh, yeah. Okay.
like all of like just to make things easier, we did things a certain way with our finances. He got a new place. I'm with my parents right now. So it's like
Yeah.
that fear of investing in something is very, very real.
Mm,
And the thing is though, is like if anything happens with our children, like let's say they get sick from school or whatever,
right.
I have to go get them. I have to take the time off. I
Mm,
have to bring them home. I have to take them to all of their extracurricular activities. And it's not like any fault of their dad, like their dads at all. It's just that's how it worked out. So yeah,
yeah, but
I
I also think there's
100
still a societal expectation. So a really quick story. There's
yeah.
a lady that's an executive at a company. I'll just leave it that vague, not to belie confidence. And she was at a business meeting. And I think it was in overseas. She was traveling for the business meeting. And she was asked, like, where are your children now that you're traveling? And I'm like, what? I mean, we're talking about
None
a
of your business.
well, I'm talking about a woman that's an executive leader at a large company, right? And this question was asked of her. And this is relatively recently within the last few years.
Yeah. It's but that's the as you said, it's the societal expectation. We're that default parent.
Yep.
And which is fine. Like I don't mind that, but there's another person that was involved in the making of this child
Right.
and they don't get asked those questions. So yeah, I still struggle with that today too. I've had people, ask me, well, who takes care of your kids? And it's just like we don't know each other that well for you to ask me that
Yeah.
question. So it's really not yeah. So it's interesting that it still comes up, but I don't
And the
know.
interesting
Hopefully,
part, Megan, really quickly, is the reverse happens. So to give our men a break out there, if they're listening, if they leave early, let's say to go pick the child up because they're sick, sometimes they get the sideways glance of why are you leaving? Right.
yeah, they do. They absolutely do. And I feel like if there's parents who have a partnership, because I have a friend and she is the main moneymaker in their situation. And she says it all the time. Her husband gets crap all the time for picking up the kids and it's not that he doesn't work. He does work, but she works more than him. And she said my
Mm,
husband gets flack all the time for
mm,
picking up the kids and dropping them off. And she's like, but we have a partnership. And she's like, I don't understand why it's anyone else's business. And I said, it's not, but that's how our society is ran for so long.
yep.
And I was like, so if you guys can create it where it works for you, then that's all that should matter. As long as the kids are fed and clean and in a good environment, that should be the only thing that matters. So it's interesting to see, yeah, how the conversation is still continuing. But the other thing, the fear of investment, there is a woman that's on all of the social media channels, and uh, her main thing that she does is teach women how to invest in things. So
Mm.
she'll like tell them about high interest rate saving accounts and CDs and stuff, and she'll give them
You're
like
gonna
a
have to
plan.
send me
And
that person after we're done. I need
yeah,
help, Megan.
but she posted something on her personal page about being on vacation in a bikini, and she got so much flack for it. She's like, this is the conversation we're having, really? Like, I
Oh
help
gosh.
people better invest in things, and you're giving me flack about a personal post that I made. She's like, okay, whatever. She's like, you all need a life. Like she was
Moving
just so
on,
mad about it.
right? That's
Yeah.
what she's saying.
But but no, I feel like there's a lot of organizations out there that are providing resources for women to gain that confidence and investment. Because again, personally, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing. It's something that I've always feared. When the term stock market comes up, I'm like,
Yep.
ooh, that
Can we just run the other way? That's what I'm thinking. And what I
what is
laugh
that?
about with this is I am good at math. Like, why the heck am I scared of this stuff? But to be honest, and I'm going to get a little apology to my financial folks and legal folks out there, I feel like they make that stuff way too complicated. I am an engineer at heart. And so I'm like, can we just like simplify this a little bit?
Yeah.
And I think it's intimidating.
But I think that's one of the things that I'm seeing with companies do too, where they're actually providing those types of resources within their company. So they'll bring in
Yeah.
experts and provide presentations on like, okay, here's what you can do with your savings. Here's some investment information. Here's some financial information. Um, so I'm starting to see more of those, and I don't know if you've seen that as well, but I'm starting to see more of those situations in some of these companies where they're helping their shop floor employees learn
Yeah.
about some of these things so that they can have a better quality life and be able to do vacation or buy a
Yeah.
house or even a new car if they need to. So I'll
Yeah,
be
it's
interested
funny.
to
One of
see.
the things I've seen, I've been around a lot of employee resource groups, or ERGs or something similar. It may have a different term, but I've seen them get more involved in this. I've seen it particularly with Black employee network groups that trying to help with the racial equity piece of it.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a good segue for like the other questions that I had for you because manufacturing is suffering this skills gap right now. I mean,
Mm.
it's being called different things where it's a labor gap, it's a skills gap, it's a applications gap, they got a ton of names for it. Basically, we don't have people coming in filling these positions that we need filled, and it could cost us trillions of dollars by
Yep.
2030. So, um, you know, I want to have this conversation about the importance of manufacturing and the contributions
Yep.
it makes, to our economy. So, what do you think is really influencing some of these gaps that we're experiencing in manufacturing? And what ideas do you have or have you seen to really kind of close those gaps so that we can strengthen our economy?
Yeah, it's a couple of things that I've seen companies do. I'm going to selfishly call this one out because I've seen this has really been where women in, I'm going to call it technical fields, is pursuing what they call returnship programs to help women return to the workplace. So I don't know if they were the original one, but the Society of Women Engineers has done this. I've seen a lot of companies pick up on this. So they are trying to find ways, like if a woman's taken, maybe a year or 2 or 3 years off to start that family or do that, or maybe take care of an elder care person, then they're like, it's usually like a 12-week, they call it a returnship, very much like an internship. But then the goal is to actually transition them into a full-time role in the organization. So I think that's a great, I'm gonna call it onboarding or on ramp for somebody who's been out of the workforce a while. Um, I I am very passionate about women in STEM. So I think one of the really big things is we got to encourage women to pursue. And actually, my passion is around staying in STEM fields. So women will try it and they're like, I can't take this anymore. So they move off. And I think to close the manufacturing gap, to have innovation, you got to have diversity around the table. So you've got to encourage women to stay in the workforce. And it also helps cover the racial or the equity gap, pardon me, the wealth equity gap, because a STEM worker on average makes 2/3 more than someone who doesn't have a STEM background. So it not only helps our manufacturing, to your point, close the gap, but um, it helps close some of the wealth gap piece of it. And then I what I've really learned in empowering women, I got to give a huge shout out is we've got to make PPE more attainable. I don't lead in this space, but what I've learned from the fashion shows that we've had empowering women, some of the companies that have come, it's just amazing the gap that we still have on that piece. But
Yeah.
I'm gonna be honest, Megan, I feel like the junior person on this question. I'm really curious to what you think on this.
Yeah, so I think my mom always said if you have children, it takes a village, and I think that same attitude applies to manufacturing. Like the brand that I have for Mavens of Manufacturing is a tribute to Rosie the Riveter. And the
Yeah.
reason being is because during that time, during the war, women were actually representing around 42 to 43% of manufacturing. Like it was a high number. And it was because, yeah, there was some propaganda behind it to really get women into the workplace. They did a really good job in marketing by showcasing the importance, because if people didn't manufacture what we needed at the time, there was a chance we could have lost the war. And it really hit that patriotic heartstring that was needed to get people into the workforce. I think we need to do that again. And help the general public really understand why manufacturing is important and what it does as a whole for our country,
Yep.
because there are communities that are struggling with economic stability, and you can see it in the community that I'm from really suffered back in the late 90s, early 2000s. Like a couple of our manufacturers actually shut down, but there was huge layoffs
Yuck.
too. And kids that I went to high school with who thought they already had their life figured out because they were going to work in the company that their generations of their families worked at, that was no longer a solution. And there was this big push to college education. And I'm not trying to down college education by any means, because I have my master's degree. And but the thing is I also come from a perspective where it took me a while to really find where I fit in with the degree that I had.
Yep.
And I just feel like that type of debt that I still have at 41, it's not fun to have. And I hear a lot of success stories where, people went to a community college or a VOTEC program and they don't have any debt anymore, and they're able to enjoy life a little bit better than I can because they are free of that type of debt. So
Yep.
I think we need to bring awareness to the financial opportunities that are available through each pathway. I think we need to bring awareness on how manufacturing really helps communities flourish, because if you come from a strong manufacturing community, I think it's said for every dollar that manufacturing makes, other businesses make like $1.50 or something like that. I have to find that stat, but it does, it helps other businesses thrive and become successful, and it just lifts up the community. So I feel like we need to relook back into our history and see how manufacturing, when it's successful, how it helps communities, and then when it's not successful, how communities kind of
Suffer.
deteriorate.
Yep.
Yeah. And so if we can really get that into not just the future generations, but also the current ones, because there are a lot of communities that don't even realize that manufacturing is in their backyard. So why are they going to care? So we really need to encourage manufacturers to be proactive and opening up their doors and letting some of their community members come in and see what they're making and why they're making it.
Yep.
And again, it all comes back to that whole sharing of stories. Like, why are stories important to this industry? Because you need that emotional connection with your audience. Because if you don't have it, they're not going to care, because they're not going to know what they don't know. Because I think it's going to take a village, and we just need to let people. One interesting thing, and I'm going to probably write a blog on it later. I didn't know we had a submarine shortage.
I didn't know that either. That's really
I didn't
interesting.
know. And I've had several conversations now on the submarine shortage. And apparently we're supposed to be building 3 submarines a year, and we're not hitting that quota. And we need over
Yeah, that
100.
sounds hard. I know that sounds like a low
Yeah,
number, but those are pretty complicated pieces of equipment.
right. And they're massive. And
Right.
currently right now we need 160,000 people to do that. So
Well,
we have to start.
the HVAC tech problem looks small compared to that.
Yeah. So, but that it's numbers, right? And I can't remember how many elephants it was, because we had this conversation in the creators lounge at IMTS, but there was like I can't remember the number of elephants that equated to, but we were talking about it in the number of elephants. And the thing is people don't understand that it's not just economic stability, it's also national security.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
we need to start telling people that here, because it like we're all about the land of the free and being able to like identify how we want and talk how we want, and we're able to do that because we've had that national security, and
Hmm.
manufacturing is a huge part of that.
Huge part of
So
that. Yep.
that's again, that's where stories come into play, that's where crucial conversations come into
Yeah.
play, that's where bringing back the pride into building stuff with your hands, and not so much focusing on, okay, let's go to a 4-year college.
Yeah.
For what though? Like, what are we
For
really,
what?
what
I mean, in full transparency, I have bachelor's degree and I also have an MBA, but I don't think that, I think we forced young people down that path. That path
yeah,
worked for me, but I was very fortunate. I had a lot of support. So I don't have the debt, but I'm one of few, right? I think I'm
yeah,
definitely in the minority. And I accidentally, I think, fell into a very practical education. I don't want to make it sound like I planned the whole thing, but some of them are, they're not as viable when you get in the world in terms of your, economic viability.
yeah.
So you
Well,
kind of sort of have to look at the cost benefit, and
so
most 18, 20 year olds don't do that. I know I did not.
right. Well, and let's talk about that. When you're 17, because some kids graduate high school at 17. I think I know a few that were overachievers and they graduated at 15, which is
Oh
awesome.
goodness,
Like I
that's
wish I could,
crazy.
I wish I could have done that because I hated school. I hated it. I have more of like a free-spirited type attitude. I like to
Yeah.
travel and I like to meet new people and taste different foods and all that stuff. So I had more of a free-spirited attitude, and I almost failed out of college several times. But what kid really wants to know their whole life story at that time? Like, I feel like you're still in the phase of being curious and
Yep.
learning how everything works. And I even told this to my daughter because she was really hell bent on going to college and doing things a certain way. And I said, why don't you take a year off though? Like, travel around the world, take random jobs here and there, learn a different language, learn different cultures. You don't have to go to college right away. It's always going to be there for you. And she's like, no, I want to just get it done and over with. So she has a
Mm,
different idea of like the value of life, which is totally fine.
right.
But I was one of those parents where I'm like, no, you should do this and mess up a couple of times and fall down a few times and travel around the world and get that life experience, then figure out what your passion is. Some kids know, they do. But I was one where I was like, I don't know what I like. I don't know what I love. I don't know. And then I happened to just fall into technical writing, and I
Right.
love the story aspect of it. But
Yep.
come on, at 17, really?
Yep.
Who's gonna not want to know
Yeah.
that?
And
Who wants
I think when I was thinking about this podcast, I think manufacturing is what I call the great equalizer. You can come in with a high school education, you can come in as you already have a trade certification, you can come in that you want to be in trades, or you could come in with a college education and
yeah,
you have a wealth of opportunity regardless at what education level you come in at.
yeah.
That's why I
Well,
love this industry.
and there's so many things that you can do. So if you decide to change your mind, you can change your mind and you
Yep.
can try something else out. And everybody's going, and everybody here, from my experience, has been really supportive and like encouraging. Yeah, I've had my bad experiences, but the good has outweighed the bad. And every person has been super encouraging. Oh, you want to learn this? You can still learn it. You're not too
Yep.
old. And like before, when I was saying, at 17, who really wants to be an adult? I mean, I'm 41. I still don't want to be an adult. Like
Yeah,
I
I'm tired
really
of
want to just,
adulting. I'm
yeah,
48 and I'm tired of adulting.
yes. But that's the greatest thing about this sector. I've met women in their late 40s, early 50s who changed their mind, and now
Yep.
they own a successful manufacturing business. And
Yep.
yeah, that's why I love it so much. I think if you have the right grit and the right mindset for it, you can do whatever you want in this
Yeah.
industry.
And you asked me about diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think manufacturing can play a unique role because many manufacturers offer the ability to go back to school. And school can mean a lot of things. It doesn't mean 2 or 4 year education. So if you come in and you're just like, I don't know what I want to do. So I start on the factory floor and then I think, oh, this welding thing looks really cool. Maybe I go get a welding certificate. Maybe I go get an HVAC certificate, right? You can go do whatever it is you want to do.
Yeah. Well, and to kind of highlight on that too, I have to give a shout out to Drew Crow.
Hmm.
He's a really good friend of mine, but his story, like I had him come to the high school that I graduated from, and I told him, I said, I'm a white girl from suburbia. They're not going to listen to me or connect with me like they will listen and connect with you because they are living the path that you lived. And
Hmm.
they need to hear from you that, yes, you made some bad decisions, you made some mistakes, it landed you in jail, but you
Hmm.
were able to turn your life around and rewrite your story. They need that hope. And he had
Hmm.
kids in tears when he shared his story. And I feel like, manufacturing is starting to focus on some of those individuals who might think, oh, I don't have another chance. No, you do.
Yeah. No, you do.
You
Yep.
can learn this pretty quickly, and your life experiences add value to this sector as a whole. So come and join us. And that's like the best part of it for me, like
Yep.
seeing people who thought, oh, I'm not going to be anything, and then they come into manufacturing and they do wonderful. It's awesome. And it's for
Yeah, and
neurodiverse people.
don't expect that you have to come in with some kind of skill set. I mean, I've seen
Yeah.
people come into manufacturing and they barely know what a screwdriver is, right?
Yeah.
And they take them from that point to making very complicated pieces of machinery.
Yeah. So it's fun. I think anybody who wants to do that. So, I mean, I know we're coming up on an hour,
Yeah, we
Shannon, which
are.
is
I can't
crazy.
believe it, Megan. It's been so
I
much
know.
fun.
But I wanted to ask you, because I always ask this with all my guests on Mavens, if you had one ask for your audience today, like what would your big ask be for them? What question would you have
My
for
big
them?
ask would be a simple phrase that actually I heard from H.J. Dewish just the other day, which is show up. So show up in your community and talk about manufacturing and what you do and how it's made a difference in your life. If you are a female in STEM, go show up in every single room that you can because they need to see that I look this way, you look that way, but we've all found our path to success. Um, and talk about how manufacturing has positively impacted your life, both from a health standpoint and for women in particular, from a financial standpoint. Talk about how it's benefited you. I know for me, it's allowed me to do investing that I didn't think was possible. So my piece of advice is to show up and show up when it's probably a little uncomfortable, but do it anyway.
To add to that, I would tell the men listeners to show up at women events, because
Yep.
I've heard a lot of guys, well, it said women and whatever, and I didn't think I was involved, that I could come. No, you're invited. Just show up and
Yep.
take part in the conversation and ask questions and offer advice, because again, that's the only way we're going to progress forward is if we're all in it together. So I
Yeah,
like that.
I'm going to do a pre-plug. So in November, I'm having my first male guest on the podcast, HJ, and I recorded this just a couple of days ago. He's going to be on in November, and he gave the same advice. I kind of stole his thunder a little bit, but totally agree, Megan.
Awesome. Well, Shannon, this has been great. Thank you
It's
so
been
much
so
for
much
having me.
fun. I owe you one. So thank you so much for being such an amazing host. Maybe you're the next Empowering Women podcast host. Who knows?
Well, no, I don't want to take your job over. I got Mavens.
Yeah, and you got your own job, right? Well,
Yeah.
happy manufacturing day, Megan.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to see you in a couple weeks at the conference.
Yeah. Super excited.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
See you soon.